Hello and welcome to Fairy Stamper. This is Amanda, and today we're going to do a light up card using Easy Lights and working with some Fairy Stamper stamps, obviously. So let's get started. So I'm just showing you a couple pictures here, and I'm going to start with a Fairy Hugs stencil. This is the Woody stencil, and I'm ink blending some scattered straw towards the bottom of it. I wanted to go for a sunset type scene. So this is why I chose these colors. So I've got a light yellow, like I said, this is scattered straw. I'm going to blend it about a little over a third of the way up. And then we're going to move on to some abandoned coral. I'm going to overlap the two colors a little bit. So here's the abandoned coral. This one I happen to have in a mini ink cube. Doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to overlap these two colors a little bit, and then I'm going to come back in with the scattered straw and make sure they blend nicely. The nice thing about using stencils is you don't have to get a perfect blend, because the stencil just kind of takes away from the fact that you didn't get a perfect blend. Sorry, kind of lost my train of thought there for a second. So I'm going to come up a little over 2/3 of the way with the abandoned coral, and then we're going to move on to a dusty Concord. Yes. Sorry, kind of forgot what color I had used there. So I'm going to flip this stencil around. I find it's easier for me to work from right to left than it is for me to work from left to right. Twist your paper however you feel most comfortable. So we're just going to overlap the abandoned coral with the dusty Concord a little bit. Make sure that those two colors blend. And then we'll pull off this stencil and see what we have here. Decided I needed a little bit more ink to make sure that these colors blend nicely. And I'm going to go back to the dusty Concord because I felt like the top edge of that panel wasn't covered completely. And then that finishes up my ink blending. Just going to remove this stencil and see the beautiful ink blending that I did. So then I decided I wanted to layer on a little bit more tree here. So I'm using the lantern tree. I'm going to stamp this in VersaFine Claire Nocturne. Now this is going to look a little funny for a little bit until I color it in, because the tree is going to look see-through. Trees are not see-through, obviously, but that's okay. I will color this in off-screen with some Arteza Real Brush markers, along with a couple of my other stamped elements, but we're just going to get the stamping done first. So, like I said, that does look a little funny, but that's okay. We're going to color that in. So I'm going to stamp Lantana here, just to get the placement correct on her. And then I'm going to stamp a couple of the lanterns from the lantern set in her hand. So for this, I'm going to do a little bit of masking. The lantern string was a little longer than I wanted it to be. It would have hung off the bottom of the page if I stamped it at the full length. So I'm just going to mask off right above her hands so that I don't accidentally stamp the chains from the lanterns above her hands. So here is the first lantern. And then once I get this stamped out, I'm going to stamp another one on a Post-it, and we're going to fussy cut that out off screen and lay that over the top just so I can mask and stamp another one behind it. Just remember that whatever lantern you want in the front is the one that you're going to want to stamp first. Mask that and then stamp the next one. And that way the one that you stamped first will appear in front and the one that you stamped second will appear in the back. So I fussy cut that off screen. I'm just going to lay that over the top. And then we're going to place our second lantern over and just decide where I want to put this. I did fidget with it a little bit. I wasn't sure exactly how much of the second lantern I wanted to show, but I did need to make sure that the candle flame at least was being shown, because I'm gonna make it light up with my lights. So I definitely needed the flame to show, obviously. And then that picked up my my mask, so make sure that you put that back if that happens to you. Otherwise, you're gonna have a problem. So just put that back, no biggie. And then we're gonna stamp the second one. And there are two lanterns in this set. They're the smaller lanterns, which I'm using here, and then there is a bigger lantern. So I decided to pull out the bigger lantern and stamp that one dangling from the lantern tree. So I'm just gonna pull off my masks here and then get that one out and stamp that hanging from the tree. I debated on whether I should use the smaller lantern or the bigger lantern, but I thought just to add a little bit of interest, I would use the bigger lantern. So after I got done with my stamping, this is when I decided that I would color my images. So I used the Arteza Real Brush markers, and I will have those colors listed in the description box below. But I used some browns to color the trees. I used a very pale blue to color the glass on the lanterns. I used some greens to color the leaves on the top of the lanterns and on her dress. And then I used some gel pens, what were those called? Stardust glitter pens. They're basically glitter gel pens to color her wings, and a couple little accents on her body, like her necklace and stuff. So now I'm just poking some holes in the flames of the candles. That way my lights will show through. Because I matted this on black cardstock, I wanted to mat it first and then poke the holes, obviously, so the holes will show through both pieces of cardstock. So I'm just making those holes a little bit bigger, and then we will get to the light portion. So these are Pear Blossom Press Easy Lights. I've had these for a little while. I do have another light up card video, actually my very first light up card video on this channel, that I actually made the light ups with copper tape and little teeny tiny LEDs. These are much easier, so if making light up cards is intimidating to you, I suggest trying the easy lights. They're very, very simple. But if you like technical stuff, it's much cheaper to do it the other way. So I will link to that video up in the iCards, so you can see that if you're interested in trying it the more technical way. In my opinion, either way isn't really difficult, but I know that some people are a little bit more intimidated by the other way. So this is a very, very simple way to make a light up card. You don't have to deal with copper tape and knowing the negative and the positive and all that kind of stuff. So there is a front and a back to these lights. The back is the part where the wire is going into the light. So I'm just making sure that I put the front of the light towards the hole in the back of my card, obviously. And then I'm just making sure that I tape it down so it stays in place. So there's a little tab that you need to pull out to make the battery work, because it's just protecting it from being activated in the mail. And then I just make sure that everything works after I've got it taped down and everything. So I'm just going to stop here and stamp my card, because it's going to get very thick here in a minute. And I want to make sure that I stamp everything that I need to stamp before my card gets too thick to put in my platform. And then I did pull out a Push Here stamp from the Fawn Push Here stamp set. It's the only stamp set that I have that has the Push Here sentiment. And now I'm just going to attach my little button mechanism here to my card base. I like to attach it to the card base with the button up, but it doesn't really matter. As long as you can still activate the button, it doesn't matter if you put a button up or button down, to be honest. So I'm just lining the button up with my Push Here sentiment, and then I'm just going to lay my card panel down on my card base where I would attach it once I'm done with everything, just to make sure that the Push Here lines up with the button, obviously, because, you know, people are going to need to know where to push, and it needs to line up correctly. And now I'm going to cover this thing with foam tape, and I'm going to double up the foam tape. In the end, I'm going to triple it actually, but I thought double would be plenty and it actually wasn't. So I'm just showing you that I grab a big old thing of foam tape, double it up, and then I'm just going to lay it on my card base here. Now my card panel is slightly smaller than my card base, not by a ton, but it is slightly smaller. So I'm not going to go edge to edge with this foam tape. I'm going to leave a little bit around the edges just to make sure that the foam tape doesn't show. I'm not going to show you putting all the foam tape on this because I think that's fairly self-explanatory. So we're just going to show you I'm going to show you putting a little bit of it on. But so here's where I realized that I needed another layer of foam tape. You can tell, and I probably should have brought this up to the camera for you, but you can tell because my foam tape stacked right up next to the battery was not as thick as that button. So if it's not as thick as the button or a little bit thicker than the button, then you know that you need to add more foam tape because it's going to activate the button as soon as I put the panel on. So what I was doing right there was I was just taping down the excess wire so it didn't get in the way. So I'm just lining up my panel here. Sorry for my big head. I needed to see what I was doing. Now I'm just putting the card panel on and making sure everything was adhered properly. And this is when I realized that right around the button, I had nothing supporting my card front. So I did stack up a tiny little sliver of foam tape, 3 foam tapes high, and just put a little bit right there just to support that bottom corner of my card panel so it didn't get squashed when it goes to the mail or whatever I decide to do with this card. Just making sure that I'm testing everything as I go along here, making sure it's still working, and this is my final card. So as you can see, it lights up. I'm going to turn off the lights for you so you can see it better. And I hope that you enjoyed my final project today. This is my final video for Fairy Stamper. I really enjoyed being on the team and creating all these projects for you. As usual, the products are listed in the description box below and linked for you. I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe to my channel and the Fairy Stamper channel. And as always, have a great day.